you should have received a flyer for the UPCA Bryce Virtual Summit that's coming up in June. And we were wishing we could be in person, but we're not. So anyway, please go ahead and share that. We had a few little bumps getting that out. So go ahead and share it. And then we need you, instead of having individuals register, you need to register through your coalition coordinator. And then, because we'll have those registrations coming in from just the 12 LSAAs. And but we will need information from people when they register, not just a name. We'll need to have their contact information, which LSAA they're with, which coalition they belong to, and their t-shirt and laptop size. And so if you can gather that information before you send that on to the LSAA coordinator, that would be really helpful. We're going to get some cool swag this year, so make sure and invite all of your members and get them there. And then I'm just really excited to hear from Heidi Baxley today from the Iron County Prevention Coalition. Heidi is one of the most creative people I know. She always has ideas that are really outside the box and fun and upbeat. And so she's going to be sharing with us some really cool things about how to do environmental scans, and I'm sure she'll incorporate a lot of creative superpowers into that too. So Heidi, thank you so much for being our guest speaker today. And I'm going to turn the time over to you.
Awesome, thank you. Let me share my screen. Make sure we got this going. Okay. So here's my obligatory, can you hear me and can you see my screen? Everything good? Okay, good.
Yes and yes.
Awesome, yeah. Thank you. Yeah, like Teresa mentioned, I'm just gonna be talking a little bit about environmental scans today, and then tobacco and alcohol marketing and laws and restrictions here in Utah. At any time during this presentation, I reference something that may be outdated or changed, feel free to stop me and say, actually, Heidi, and let us know the correct information, because I am definitely not an expert on any of this content, and I want to make sure that I'm getting the right information out there. And feel free to share anything that's happening in your communities or any stories that you may have, because I think it would be an interesting discussion to talk about different things that we're seeing throughout the state, not just kind of what I'm seeing in Iron County. So yeah, with that being said, I'll go ahead and get started. So what is an environmental scan? Well, the CADCA Environmental Strategies Primer, which is located online if anybody wants it. You can pick it up in print at actual CADCA events, but it is located online and you can just download the PDF and have it for yourself. It defines environmental scan as environmental scanning is a useful assessment method coalitions can employ to gather visible information on local conditions surrounding alcohol, tobacco, and other drugs. Some common environmental strategies that you may associate with environmental scans could be any of these, and I won't read them all out loud, but I think most of them we're pretty familiar with. And I think it's really important to work with your coalition to exactly what kind of questions you want answered. So most of the time when we think about environmental scans, we think about use. So I think about like taking my youth coalition to the parks and collecting cigarette butts, or going to the river, to the lake, and checking the trash cans for beer cans and beer bottles, and just that evidence of youth or use. And I think it's really impactful to have that, especially if you're going to be working on policy in your community. For example, in one of my communities, the city was very hesitant to work with our coalition because they just saw us as kind of like an outside government agency that wanted to come in and update policies and oppress their citizens. And they didn't even think that smoking in the parks was an issue. They were aware of the Clean Air Act in 2008, and they knew that our parks were smoke-free, and they thought that was enough. So it was really impactful when we had our youth coalition bring in trash bags of cigarette butts that we found littered in the parks, and survey information from people in the parks, showing that they didn't know that the parks were smoke-free. So just a plug for collecting of that use evidence. Some other things to consider would be advertising, physical and virtual. So not only the signage around your community, but the social media information in your community. And the little flip right here on the bottom right hand corner of the screen is actually from Reddit. If any of you guys use Reddit, it's like a social media platform where you can pick the different forums that you're interested in, and it'll post very specific stuff to your feed. And so this is just one of the things that I'm interested in. And this cigarette butt trash information popped up the other day, and I took a screenshot of it because I thought it was so interesting. Anyway, and then signage is another thing that you should be mindful of when completing your environmental scans and looking around your community. Another thing you should be mindful of when completing your scans in your community are the 4 Ps. In marketing, those are product, place, price, and promotion. In prevention, we think of it as far as price, like how much does a 22-ounce beer cost when compared with a 12-ounce can of soda? Or is alcohol less expensive in certain times of day? Or is there an excess tax? So I remember when I first started in prevention, the UPCA was working on trying to get the Utah legislature to up the excise tax on alcohol because it hadn't been done in so long, and you could go and purchase a can of beer for less than a bottle of water, which I thought was really interesting. And so that kind of information is really relevant when working with your key leaders. Maybe they don't even notice that kind of stuff. Something else to consider is the product. Does the product specifically appeal to certain populations like Alka-Pops or favorite cigarettes that are specifically targeting youth? Or is the beer provided in single cans or bottles with a high alcohol content? So this one is called snake venom. It doesn't actually contain snake venom, but it contains 67.5% alcohol by volume. And just to put that into perspective, here in Utah, the most that we can have at our like grocery stores and retail establishments is 5%. So pretty scary, pretty dangerous alcohol. And we obviously don't have it here in Utah. Promotion is another thing to consider. Are there happy hour regulations? Is there a time or a price of alcohol when it's less expensive or more accessible? Or does the community allow for 2-for-1 specials? Here in Utah, we don't allow happy hours or any other promotion which discounts beer or liquor prices or anything that promotes overconsumption. Promotion is another thing to consider. Are there community festivals that revolve around alcohol or tobacco use? So this is a festival that's going to be happening in our community in July. And they advertise it as all ages welcome to this event. So as a result of community events like this, our coalition has been looking into working with our city to update our alcohol policies, specifically when it comes to festivals like this or beer gardens, to make it a little bit less accessible for youth. But it's just kind of scary, like all ages welcome. Another thing to consider promotion is how these businesses are promoting their products. So this is one of our local vape shops, and they're not necessarily doing anything illegal, but we're a college town and we have SUU down here, and it really, really bothers me that they tag SUU in all their advertisements. And I did look into it. It's not illegal. It's just, I don't know, distasteful. And I'm really surprised that the university hasn't said anything about it yet, but those are things to be looking for on those virtual advertisements when you're doing environmental scans. Things that could make it seem more normal. Next thing to consider is placement. Is the beer next to the soda in the cooler of local convenience stores or grocery stores, or do beer caves make large amounts of cold beer available? And then are products displayed where they can be stolen easily? Now here in Utah, you won't find a container of Swisher Sweets out on the counter like this, but I thought it was a really good picture just to show an example of how easy it would be for someone to distract the clerk and someone else to be able to grab a handful of the Swisher Sweets and run out the door. Also consider location when you're doing environmental scans, especially locations of schools, churches, daycare centers, police and fire stations, any kind of community locations, especially when it comes to proximity laws, because there are a lot of restrictions in place. And then parks and recreation areas as well. I heard a story once about a community in our area that is working to address underage drinking, and they were trying to figure out what the local condition was. And so they collected data and did some focus groups and some environmental scans. And what they figured out is that kids were going to the local lake, and while parents and adults that had coolers of alcohol were out enjoying the lake, they would leave the coolers at their campsite or in the back of their truck. And kids would steal the alcohol then while the coolers were not guarded. So keep that kind of stuff in mind. And then when in doubt, map it out. I think it's really interesting, especially for coalition members to be participating in this kind of an activity and for you to share with your key leaders. It's a good visual and it's really great when making your case. So for example, this was back in 2015, I believe, when we were trying to get a moratorium placed on issuing any more tobacco specialty business licenses in our city, because we had so many. I think at the time we had 6 tobacco specialty businesses and then another 35 retail establishments that sold electronic cigarettes. So we were thoroughly saturated compared to a county like Weber County, which is like quadruple our population, and we had more access to electronic cigarettes than they did. So I think this was really powerful to show like our city council how much access we had to these products. So it's always really interesting to map it out. And then I encourage people to take photos, take notes, take screenshots. I have tons of them on my phone and on my computer, so I'll be sharing some of those with you today. But this is an example of one of our local grocery stores, and this is their cigarette aisle. And I always like to walk by it and check what they have up. And I should say that a lot of these grocery stores and retail establishments, they don't display these things a certain way because they're trying to be malicious. They just don't know. So it's a good opportunity for you and your coalition to work with these folks in the community, build those relationships and educate them on prevention. So for example, the picture on the right, they have stuffed animals up above the cigarettes and tobacco products. And this is a constantly changing thing. Like if it's Valentine's, they have Valentine's stuff up there. If it's Christmas, they've got Christmas stuff up there. It drives me absolutely crazy. This is an example of one of our local grocery stores, and this is their toy aisle. And they put a beer display up right in front of the aisle. And so we did go in and talk to them, and they did promptly move it. Like I said, they're not doing it on purpose. They just don't know. This is a really good opportunity to educate your coalition on marketing and environmental scans too, because it's always really cool as a preventionist getting a text or an email from one of your youth or adult coalition members that says like, oh, check out this picture, like this looks a little strange. What do you think of this? Is this legal? And it's always really cool and a fun way to collect those pictures and collect that information for your environmental scans. This is another display. I pulled this one off the internet just because I thought it was really interesting. It's specifically, of course, pulling on your heartstrings for military families, but these are another 2 alcohol displays that the one is a movie night display. Like, I don't know, most of the time when I think of a movie night, I don't necessarily think of alcohol. So, I mean, it's just a targeted advertisement from Bud Light, I suppose. And then this alcohol display on the end of it has Oreos with Swedish fish. This display, I took at one of our local, took a picture of it, one of our local grocery stores. And they have, when you first come in the door, probably 8 or 9 pallets worth of Halloween candy. And then on the end of the display of pallets, they had a pallet of Bud Light. And that's a big no-no. And kind of distasteful. We did reach out to them and they did move it. This is just a display from one of our like mom and pop toy stores where they had candy cigars and candy tobacco. This is a social media screenshot that I took recently of somebody advertising painting on business windows. And as you can see, it's got characters from Scooby-Doo, the vape products. Really bothers me. He doesn't have any legs. Anyway, this kind of stuff would never be done with alcohol or traditional tobacco. So we really have to watch it with electronic cigarettes. this is another set of advertisements that I took screenshots of from just our local like Facebook blog shops. And these are folks that are advertising like medicine sessions, like natural medicine. So the one on the Amazonian plant sacraments, really distasteful right now, especially with COVID. Like the guy is literally blowing like this powder into the other guy's nostril that cannot be sanitary or hygienic right now. I did look it up, and this Rapé is almost like a tobacco product, but it's in a powder form. And this other one, the Cacao Circle, I looked it up, and it is something that's used to, what's the word? Increase high on marijuana. So it's something that you take to make your high even stronger. So I think it's important to be knowledgeable about stuff like that that's happening in the community too. It may not be a huge issue now, but it could be something that could be an issue in the future. Like I said, I love scoping this stuff out and taking screenshots, but I also really like to follow these businesses that I'm concerned about on their social media pages so that I know what's going on. I know what they're advertising or any kind of promotions or anything that they're doing. And it just kind of keeps me in the loop. One of my favorite things to take screenshots of, though, are the targeted ads that are given to me on my social media. So I don't know who this algorithm thinks that I am, but I want to be this like rock climbing, chicken raising French lace jumpsuit preventionist. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about tobacco laws and restrictions. Does anybody have any questions about environmental scans before I move on? It was just a very brief overview. Hopefully it was useful. Okay, I'm going to keep going then. So as far as is concerned here in our state, we do have two entities that oversee like tobacco compliance in our state. We have the Utah Department of Health, and in our area, they do compliance checks not only for underage buys, but for marketing and advertisement. Make sure that they do that about twice yearly. And then the Food and Drug Administration also contracts with folks throughout the state of Utah to do compliance checks and check for advertising and marketing as well. And the really cool thing about the contracting with the Food and Drug Administration is that they look for folks that are already in the community, that already work for state or local or government jobs that have already had these extensive background checks, and they partner with those folks to do these compliance checks. And it's a fun way for folks like you and I to make a little extra cash and to get that extra compliance check data. And we are given the responsibility of finding those underage buyers to work with. And so it's a good opportunity to recruit kids from your youth coalitions, if you have them, to be able to help you out with that. And they can make a little extra money too. It's harder in the smaller areas because most of the people know you as the prevention person. So you can't always go into these gas stations and retail establishments with an underage buyer and not look suspicious. But in the bigger areas, I think it's a good way to do compliance checks and to get that data and to get a little extra money. I know right now that they are not doing the FDA compliance checks because of COVID. It's kind of on a hiatus, but they will be starting back within the next few months, I believe, and the health department is continuing to do that. And let me just put a plug in for the health department. If you're not already working with the health department in your area, they are such an amazing resource. I know down here in the Southwest, we have a really good relationship with our health department staff. Oftentimes they're working on a lot of the same stuff that we're working on. They're just a really great resource, not only for the people, but for their data, for funding, and just a really great relationship. For example, this is some data that was shared with me from the health department for our tobacco compliance in fiscal year 2020. She put it on this cute little graph and made it really, really cute, but really interesting data for coalitions. And then the Tobacco Prevention and Control Group in Utah, they put out an annual report every year that has all sorts of information about compliance checks and secondhand smoke, people calling into the quit line. And it's it's region by region data. So it's really good data. And then another really cool thing the health department does is something called Operation Vapefront, which is an environmental scan where they'll send their health educators out to check for alcohol and tobacco advertising. And I just put the first and the last page of the actual paperwork that they use, but it's probably 4 pages, and it's really good data, and it would be something interesting to get your youth coalition involved into. So I wanted to put a plug in for that as well. So here in Utah, our laws restrict how retailers sell tobacco products, electronic cigarettes, and any other nicotine products to the public. Most retailers can only sell products in retail establishments where they are face-to-face with the customer. So you'll never see a display like this. There are no self-serve displays allowed here in Utah. So you shouldn't see anything on the counter that should be accessible. It should have that hard plastic, and the clerk should be able to reach through and grab it and then hand it to you if that's something that you want to purchase, with the exception of course, the tobacco specialty business. And I did put some information on here, which I won't read out loud, but that gives you more information on the tobacco specialty business. Oh, are you still there? My internet connection is very unstable. Can you guys
We can still hear you, Heidi.
still hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good. Sorry, my screen went blank for a second. So I'm like, uh-oh, I'm losing them. Okay, I will keep going then, and hopefully I don't lose you. As far as the tobacco specialty businesses, they are regulated and restricted by the amount of sales they make or amount of floor space that they are given to vape products. And here in Iron County, if they have vape in the name of their business, they are considered a tobacco specialty business and have to license as such. Thing that you really need to watch for in your areas, because a lot of these businesses will try to fly under the radar and not license as a tobacco specialty business because they don't want to be tied down by these restrictions for proximity laws and things like that. So you'll see businesses that say they're a knick-knack store or a dollar store, but most of their counter space will be devoted towards vapor or vape products. So just something to watch for. They want to get close to like schools and those community areas, and being a tobacco specialty business would limit that. Like I mentioned earlier, tobacco specialty businesses are limited as far as proximity. So they can't be within 1,000 feet of a community location. That's like a school, a church, a park, any kind of community gathering space, or 600 feet within another retail tobacco specialty business, or any kind of property that's zoned for agriculture or residential use. Tobacco specialty businesses also have to have signage on their door that says no one under 21 is permitted without a parent or guardian. And they do have to put signage up that says that they won't sell to anyone over 21 years of age. And that's something that the health department and the FDA will check. Also here in Utah, we restrict how businesses can advertise or distribute like smokeless tobacco, chewing tobacco, e-cigs to customers without a charge. So retailers can't sell or offer for sale or furnish any e-cigarette product at less than cost, or can't discount any e-cigarette product below cost when the customer makes another purchase. And any person that violates these laws is guilty of a Class C misdemeanor and a Class B for any subsequent offense. So as I was doing research for this, I found this advertisement for one of our local vape shops, and I wonder if they violated this. So I'm going to do some research on this, but I wanted to include it because I'm sure that's something that we're going to see with a lot of different vape stores, the buy one, get one free, or the discounts. And then another thing, this is nationwide, not only in Utah, but we are not allowed, retailers are not allowed to sell single cigarettes, or loosies is what they're called. But in the larger, more urban areas, cigarettes, traditional tobacco are highly taxed, and customers can't always afford that. And so some retailers were breaking open the packs and selling the individual cigarettes in that. And so the FDA worked with the national government to make that a big no-no. So that's not allowed either. And that's definitely something that those two agencies look for as well, like a basket on the counter of just single tobacco cigarettes. We're also not allowed nationwide to have tobacco vending machines or anything that allows access without identification. And then in Utah, tobacco retailers can't advertise a tobacco product or an e-cigarette product or a nicotine product unless they are both licensed and permitted to sell those products. So a vape shop would hopefully be licensed as a tobacco specialty business to sell those products, but it's always something interesting to look into and to check. And if you want information about the retail establishments in your community that are licensed, you can work with your health department to get that information and they can get you a list. And then if a business is allowed to advertise e-cigarette products, it can't market the product as a cessation device. The master settlement agreement states that traditional tobacco advertising outside of stores must be limited to just 14 square feet. And that's on trash cans, on the windows, on the gas pumps, and that's something that's also checked. I just wanted to share with you an example of how one of our local vape shops was advertising their company. So the gentleman that owned this vape shop is very big into the Renaissance Festival that we have here every summer. And when he opened his vape shop, he brought this giant pirate ship and parked it in front of his vape shop and then put signage for his store on this pirate ship. And the funny thing is, at the time, he was advertising himself as a vape shop, but he wasn't even licensed as a tobacco specialty business. We did end up working with the city council to fix that so that wouldn't happen again. But that year, this only happened for 1 year, but that year he brought that pirate ship to every parade and marched it down Main Street with his Big Hit Vapor sign on it. And every festival that we had in the park, it was parked there. And our whole coalition just cringed the whole time, but there wasn't really anything that we could do about it. But we are going to be working with our city council to try to limit that kind of advertising again in the future. Yeah, totally kids on the boat. I probably should have blurred out their faces, but yeah, those are kids on the boat advertising the vape shop. Ugh. We just cringed the whole time. I'm sure he was a super really nice guy, but it only happened for the year, and after that it never came back again. But just stuff to watch for, and I don't think he meant it maliciously. He just didn't know. I did want to put in a plug for the countertobacco.org photo contest that's happening right now. If you need a fun activity for your youth coalition to go out in the community and look for stuff like that, this is happening. It's just countertobacco.org. They have a lot of really great resources on their website of photos that are taken throughout the country of suspicious looking tobacco displays or marketing or things like that. So, and then, yeah, like I mentioned earlier, check your county's tobacco laws. Things could be different county to county. We do try to work with our different counties to make things. Oh, thanks, Craig. Yeah, totally. So Craig says, I wouldn't worry about blurring faces of kids in a parade, but using them to advertise a product illegal for their use seems very wrong. And I'm thinking already against the law. Yeah, that whole summer. Ugh. But after that, we did work with our city council to make it so that if you have a vape shop in your name in our community, you have to be a tobacco specialty business. You just have to. And our mayor is a lawyer. She was very, very hesitant to put any bans on any businesses coming into the community, including vape shops. But she did work with us to make it a little bit harder by changing those proximity laws a little bit and making it a little bit more difficult for those businesses to come into our community. So work with your county, check on their laws, and if there's things that you don't like, you know, see if you can work with your mayor or your city attorney or your county attorney to make those things a little bit different, make it a little bit more effective for prevention. All right, so I'm going to move on to alcohol. I thought this was really interesting. I went to the DABC website, and on the website it says specifically the sale and service of alcoholic beverages is regulated by the state of Utah. Alcoholic beverage control is a concept that Utah shares with several other states, and I think it was 13. I ended up looking it up. It was about 13 or 14 states that do this, and some counties within states. Utah liquor laws are based on the general philosophy of making alcoholic beverages available in a manner that reasonably satisfies the public demand. In this respect, however, the state does not promote or encourage the sale or use of alcohol. Boom, I love that. So alcohol proximity laws. Like I mentioned earlier, check your county. It could be a little bit different in your county, but as far as the state, it's pretty restrictive. Restaurants may not be located within 300 feet, measured by ordinary pedestrian travel, or 200 feet measured in a straight line. And that seems to be one that keeps coming up during the legislative session. And I feel like UPCA is pretty good about staying on top of that kind of stuff. But that's something to be mindful of, that these retail establishments are always trying to change that proximity law. Other outlets may not be located within 6 feet measured by ordinary pedestrian travel, or 200 feet measured by a straight line. I wanted to put a plug in for the DABC as far as their licensee handbooks. If you want to learn more about kind of what the restrictions are statewide for the different folks that sell alcohol, the licensee handbooks are really great. They give a lot of really good information. Most of us will probably be looking at the off-premise here, which is the retail establishments, but there's information about anything from hotels to airport lounges to arenas. And they have information on their website as far as like single event permits. So if you've got a lot of beer gardens happening in your community, which we do, you can learn more about those on there and work with your county to make those a little bit safer as well. So like I mentioned before, off-premises consumption would be like your grocery stores and your gas stations. A beer retailer may have no more than 2 locations which are visible, and those could be display cabinets, coolers, aisles, floor displays, or rooms such as beer caves, or the pallet displays that they'll have in the middle of the floor, just the 2. The display may not be adjacent to a display of non-alcoholic unless the location is a cooler with a door from which the non-alcoholic beverages are not accessible. So as you can see in this picture, like this grocery store is out of compliance. This is one of our local grocery stores. Not only do they have the alcohol right next to the pop or the soda, whatever you call it, but they don't have signage on it. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. Here's another display that has alcohol with the soda. And the beer must also be separated from the display of non-alcoholic beverages by a display of 1 or more non-beverage products or another physical divider. So this is another example of a beer display. There's Oreos in between it. Now, if they wanted to put another beverage next to this on the other side of the Oreos, they could, in theory, like Coke or soda, that would be in compliance. This is just something I noticed while I was out taking pictures for this presentation. It's not necessarily illegal, but I just think it's interesting the way that things are marketed in the alcohol aisles. Hopefully everybody knows what this is, but these, they don't necessarily say that they're beer pong, but everybody knows that these are beer pong supplies to be able to play these beer games. So this is an example of one of the stores I went into yesterday. These displays were straight across the aisle from each other, probably within 3 feet of each other. So, and they look very similar to me. So there's cans of mango passion fruit, sparkling water, and then right across from it is hard seltzer. And there was no signage on the hard seltzer that said it was an alcoholic beverage, which is a no-no. So alcohol warning signage must be prominently posted in areas where beer is sold, saying that these beverages contain alcohol. Please read the label carefully. The size of the sign and the print must be sufficiently large enough as to be readable and clearly and unambiguously convey to a consumer that the beverage product displayed contains alcohol. And these are just some examples of ones that I've collected. These are really good examples, I think. Here are some more creative examples from my community, the floor cling, and then on the signage for the price. Another couple examples. And this particular store also had signage up at the registers as well that said you must be 21 years old to buy alcohol or tobacco. So go Linz. This is an example of a display that I saw in another one of our local grocery stores. They look very similar to just regular soda pop, but these are considered, I think, Alka Pops. Mike's Hard Lemonade and the White Claw, these fizzy things, hard seltzers, but they look like soda, and they didn't have signage saying that they were an alcoholic product. I don't know if that's still required for these floor displays or not, have seen them on there before. So I don't know if this was just a fluke and the person that set up the display forgot, but something to look for in your community. And here's the example that the DABC handbook gives to licensees of the signage that they would like displayed. So as far as gas stations, it's the same. They must have signage that says you have to be 20 over to purchase or to enter these beer caves, and that the beverages contain alcohol, and please read the label carefully. Some other information that I thought was really interesting. Here in Utah, we're not allowed to do any alcohol delivery. This includes carside unless the customer enters the store for the transaction. So you can't, on walmart.com, you can't order beer and have it put in the back of the trunk of your car with your normal pickup order. No alcohol is allowed in self-checkouts unless the store requires an associate to check all IDs self-checkouts. Some do, some don't. So I think it just varies store to store. And then no alcohol promotions where the customer must purchase alcohol to participate. Like on this one, it says no purchase necessary. They need to be all like that. They don't want to encourage folks to purchase alcohol just to be entered into a drawing to win something. Those are kind of cool. Check your county's alcohol laws. Like here in Iron County, packaged beer can be sold by private vendors between 7 a.m. and 1 a.m. Any day of the week. This picture right, I pulled off of Reddit, and I don't know where it is, but it was a Utah specific forum, and these people were complaining about not being able to purchase alcohol. So I'd be really interested to figure out which county this is. But even on the bottom of the sign, it says to reach out to your local, your Utah state representative and ask for the insanity to end. So it's different county to county based on what the norms are there. I did want to mention, as far as beer coolers and messaging, when I first started working with our coalition, we identified that underage drinking was an issue, and kids were telling us on their Sharps data that they were getting the alcohol from parties, and that they were getting them from parents with permission. So our coalition decided we were going to do this messaging campaign. We were going to work with Parents Empowered, and we were going to get this social host information, this message on every beer cooler in our county. We were so excited about it. And so we worked with Parents Empowered. We got the clings printed, and we sent coalition members out into the community to get these clings up. And I would say more than half of the gas stations turned us away, because what we didn't know is that the beer coolers are actually owned by the beer companies themselves. So whoever the gas stations contract with. And so they're not actually owned by the gas station. So the only thing that they can put on these coolers are the things that are approved by these beer wholesalers. So the only people that ended up being able to put up the clings were the mom and pop stores in our communities. So we were only able to get probably half the clings out. But bigger businesses like Maverick and Shell and Texaco couldn't put the clings up for us as much as they wanted to. They just weren't allowed to put them on the beer coolers. So that's something to keep in mind when working in your communities, is to figure out what the restrictions for the retailers are, because maybe they are contracted to do certain things and to certain things that we aren't aware of. And then another story I heard was from the Panguitch Prevention Coalition. And they were working on the same thing. And one of the things that they identified in their community was that there was a lot of beer-related collateral in their gas stations. So they came up with the idea of working with Parents Empowered to recreate all this collateral with prevention messaging and give those to the gas stations. And that was another thing that the gas station said is, we're only allowed to sell this beer in our establishment if we keep this stuff up. So the clock, the take a penny, the rug, we can't remove any of that stuff. So keep that in mind when you're working with your local alcohol retailers to kind of see what their restrictions are. It's something that we had never really thought about. Here is a list of resources from all the information that I've gathered, and I can send that out. A lot of the stuff is available online. Hopefully it's all still accurate, and hopefully I was able to communicate it in a way Craig said, I think the state ought to work with getting the retailers to post the signs. It would be very interesting to see how they would respond. I have to wonder if they would block it, encouraging people to follow the law. Totally agree. And it was such a great idea that Panguitch came up with. So I was really sad that they weren't able to do it. All right. Thank you guys so much for listening. I know that was a lot of information. Does anybody have any questions? It's totally
This
okay.
is Melissa. Hey, I literally just barely jumped on. So part of that was a lot of companies have their own, like, several different restrictions. So it just, if you were to approach them, each individual store has a different contract with a different beer company. So it's not that you can't completely do that. There just is, what does the contract say for that individual store and with the different beer companies. So anyways, I just wanted to say, it wasn't like we couldn't completely not do it. There just is, like you mentioned, some restrictions. So I just didn't want anybody to be turned off like, oh, that's next to impossible to do. But it just is, the beer companies have really strict contracts. And so just like you said, double check on that. So just wanted to clarify that.
Awesome. Thanks for clarifying. Leanne said, back to environmental scans. What environmental scan did you use with the youth? Did you create your own or one created here in Utah? Oh, with the youth, all we did is trying to address youth e-cigarette and tobacco use. And so we initially approached like the mayor and the city manager about making the parks smoke and vape free, because we noticed during some of the events over the summer, there was a lot of smoking going on in the parks. And like I said, they were kind of hesitant, only because they didn't want to be seen as oppressing people's rights. And so our environmental scan was to take our youth out into the parks and collect cigarette butts we just did it once or twice in a 1 week period, and we got several trash bags full. And we were able to go back and show them, like, I know that you know that the parks are smoke free, but because there's no signage and no enforcement, our community doesn't know, and it's happening. And so we've got this litter problem and a potential fire danger, community norms. And so by just going and collecting the cigarette butts, we were able to make a huge impact in our policy work. Does that kind of answer your question, Leanne? I hope so. Okay, thanks. Oh, no, we haven't done anything with alcohol yet, but we want to. There's a lot of alcohol advertising going on in our community. So I think that's our next thing after we get all the smoke-free parks done. I think we want to address alcohol advertising. Anybody else have any other questions? Okay, thanks. I guess I'll turn it back to T.
Okay, wow, Heidi, that was really, really good. Thank you so much. I learned a lot, and I'm sure the rest of us, that everyone else had learned a lot as well. So thank you for a very thorough presentation about environmental scans and policy. And some of the things that stood out to me that I really appreciated whenever we're doing work in our communities with educating the community about policies, I love that Heidi was always giving the people she was working with the benefit of the doubt, instead of being confrontational and assuming the worst, just going in with a relationship building attitude and educating in a way that's going to create allies and not polarize people from the work that we're doing. So thank you for always being good at that, Heidi. You're great that way. So thank you. And just before we jump off, one more thing really quickly. If you have not registered for the virtual Bryce Summit, we're excited for that. You should have received a flyer with some instructions on gathering information about the things that we need in order for the LSAAs to register the people in their community. So again, you'll need their name, the first and last, their email, their laptop size, their t-shirt size, and which coalition they are with in order for you to register them. We're doing that so that we don't have a million things coming in for Southwest from all over the state. So anyway, just know that registration's open. There's a deadline and that will come up actually pretty quickly too. So
Teresa,
thank you. Yeah.
this is Heather. Is
Hi,
there,
Heather.
hey, I sent Melissa an email earlier, but since we're talking about it, is there CEUs offered for the summit?
Yes, we are working on that. And if you, for those of you who scheduled a speaker, I need that information today in order to get the CEUs secured. We didn't know about that until today. So if you secured a speaker for that and you haven't gotten that information to me, I need that before the end of the day. So thanks, Heather, for that question.
Yeah, should I hold off to tell people or make sure that?
If I have to hunt it down, I'm going to make sure that's going to happen. So tell them yes, we will have CEUs available.
Awesome. Thanks, Teresa.
Yep, you bet. Thanks, everyone. If you didn't sign the roll, please do that before we hop off. See you next month. Yay.